passion, foreplay, sex. We assume that just the mention of these words would invoke a thought of pleasure. But for many, just uttering the word sex invokes deep guilt and lasting shame. Certified professional sex coach Cam Fraser knows from personal experience how these negative feelings can impact love and relationships in our life. On this episode of Heart to Heart, this sex coach talks about going beyond surface level sex and into more meaningful sexual experiences, free of anxiety or shame. He also reveals how to have sex talks that lead to positive outcomes. Hey everybody, thank you so much for being on Heart to Heart today. This is an amazing episode. I get to talk with the incredible Cam Fraser. Thank you, my brother. You are all the way in a different time zone. Tell everybody where you're at right now.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me on firstly. I'm actually in Perth, Western Australia. So it's 9 p.m. at night here, and I'm just about to go to bed, but I've set aside some time to have a nice chat with you.
Well, I appreciate it over there, my brother, and thank you for being on. Look, your work is so incredible. You do a lot of amazing things, especially around being a certified professional sex coach, a certified sexologist, which you're gonna have to let me know what that is, a registered counselor, and a registered tantric yoga teacher. I mean, my man, how did you get into this work?
It's a long story, man, but to sum it up or to put it in a nutshell, I studied psychology and mental health and counseling and philosophy in America. Actually went to school over there. I was also a student athlete. I was playing soccer. I seriously injured my back, and as part of my rehabilitation, I was introduced to yoga, Pilates, meditation, breath work, things like that. So I was introduced to two of these worlds, the academic world through psychology and philosophy, and then the spiritual world, if you want to call it that, through tantra and yoga and things like this. I was at the time going through my late teens, early 20s, going through some sexual dysfunction stuff, from premature ejaculation, erectile dysfunction. I was drinking heavily as well. All of my sexual experiences for about 4 years were influenced by alcohol. I didn't have one sober sexual encounter. I was really struggling to connect intimately with the young women that I was being sexual with, and a lot of my own masculinity and sexuality was internally conflicting because I was part of this kind of misogynist locker room culture, and I was in a pretty bad mental health space for a long time. So it was through the injury and through slowing down and through listening to my body and actually learning more about sexuality, learning more about masculinity and my own physiology that I started to overcome my sexual issues, all through my own lived experience of learning how to breathe, learning how to stretch, learning how to listen to my body, how to process emotions. And I was really intrigued by that. I overcame my own issues and insecurities, and I was like, oh, there's something to this, I wanted to continue to pursue it. And I continued studying. I did some postgrad degrees in sexology, actually, and in counseling as well. And then I also supplemented all of those studies with a lot of travel and kind of experiential studies, if you want to call it that. So I went to South America and did some plant medicine there, and went over to Thailand, ordained as a Buddhist monk in Thailand. I went to India to study yoga. I tried all these different experiences to bring it all into one modality, I suppose. And that modality for me looked like yoga for a little while, then it looked like counseling, and now it looks like sex coaching specifically, because it allows me to draw on a whole bunch of different healing modalities that yoga doesn't necessarily allow for, or that talk therapy doesn't necessarily allow for. I can bring all of that together into the coaching that I do today. And it's specifically for men. That's my lived experiences as a cisgender heterosexual white dude. So that's my demographic. That's what I can speak to with authority. That's my own, my own life. So I tailor the information and the education that I do to myself, to the young man that I was 10 or so years ago. The stuff that I needed to hear. I needed a masculine role model, a guy who was just comfortable with his sexuality, was comfortable talking about it, was knowledgeable, and that's the type of guy that I try and be today.
That's powerful, man. I mean, that was a nutshell. So you did a really good job of summing all of that up. That was pretty incredible. That's such a journey. That's such a journey. Which one of those experiences, if you could just pick one out,
do you feel most resonate with where you are right now in your life?
Ooh, that's a big one. I did a workshop several years ago that was it was like an 8-day immersion, I suppose, an 8-day experience, and the culmination of that experience was like this. It was kind of like a sexuality, spirituality immersion, and on the last day, we did this practice called a sacred spot massage, and really that's just a spiritual way of saying we did a prostate massage, and I had a prostate massage for the first time. It's the first time I'd ever been like penetrated. It's the first time I'd ever had my prostate stimulated, and it was the first time I'd ever had a prostate orgasm as well.
Wow.
And that was a big turning point for me, because it opened up my whole experience of my own sexuality. I'd never thought about having like a prostate orgasm before. It'd always been something I had a lot of fear around. As a lot of straight dudes typically have a lot of fear around any butt stuff, right? So,
right, stay away from the butt, right?
Yeah, exactly. So that was a huge turning point for me in terms of my own sexual experiences and what I talk about now. And I talk about, I guess you could say, like alternative ways of expressing your sexuality and exploring your sexuality, right? There's a stock standard way, which is, you just jerk off like a jackhammer when you're masturbating, or you just thrust and pound away hard and fast when you're having sex. And that can be pleasurable. I'm not saying that it can't be, but if that's the only way that you're experiencing and expressing your sexuality, then it becomes quite limiting and almost boring in a sense. So I try and encourage guys particularly to look outside the box and kind of lean on their curiosity and explore alternative ways of experiencing pleasure and expressing themselves sexually. And because that's such a big part of what I do today, if you're asking me that question, if I reflect on where that's come from, it's definitely come from that kind of spark that I had to have this completely different and unique kind of sexual experience.
Wow. I mean, that's brilliant that you were able to even have the experience to know that. You're absolutely right. A lot of my completely heterosexual friends, they deal with a lot of body parts that they have shame around. I know some of my friends, they don't like, their straight friends, they don't like getting their feet touched, so no like pedicures. They don't like anything even remotely touching their booty. And even if they are athletes, like the little butt tap that athletes will give each other sometimes, that they'll be okay with that. But that's about it. How for the average person who isn't able to experience that, or didn't experience that like you did, how do you convey to them that level of freedom?
Yeah, so there's an analogy that I like to use, which is called this. It's called the erotic menu, right? And I share with couples, particularly, and regardless of who the couple is, I say, when we're hungry, right? For example, we choose what to eat off a menu, right? And we choose something that we want to eat, that we're hungry for, that satisfies this kind of craving that we have. And the same thing happens when we're horny, right? We choose off an erotic menu to satisfy our horniness rather than our hunger. But for a lot of couples, and even if you think of your own personal erotic menu as well, like how do you satisfy your own needs as an individual? There's typically only one thing on that erotic menu, right? It's penetrative sex, right? If you're a heterosexual couple, it's typically only P&V, sex, penis and vagina sex. But and if you're by yourself and you're a guy, it's typically just like, it talks to a lot of guys the way they masturbate. The only thing on their erotic menu is, okay, I'm going to put some porn on. I'm going to sit down. I'm just going to masturbate like a chimpanzee, essentially, just very fast and vigorous and until I ejaculate. And so if you're like, and I use this, the same analogy. If you're eating and there's only one thing on your menu for the rest of your life, it might be a really good meal. It might be something that's delicious, But if you're eating that same thing for every single meal for the rest of your life, it's going to be, it's going to be dull. I'm not saying that it's not a great meal, but I'm just saying that some variety is necessary for a healthy sex life. And that could be a variety of different people for some. It could be a variety of different experiences for another person. It could be a variety of both. But variety is, the spice of life. It's important for meals, and it's important for our sexual experiences as well. So that's kind of the analogy that I use to get the ball rolling, and that is usually a bit of a light bulb moment for people. They kind of go, oh yeah, you're right, I only have this one outlet, I suppose, for my sexual needs in order for them to get met. So I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
that's not a bad thing. Let's, now that we've kind of drawn this awareness, what can we do to add to this menu? What are some other things that, start to think a little bit in terms of like what feels good for you, what gives you pleasure? What are some things you can add to that erotic menu? Not only your own, but also as a couple. What are some other things you can do together when there's, when there's maybe a mismatch in hunger, right? Or a mismatch in awareness, and someone wants something a little bit more, someone wants something a little bit less, or someone's not as hungry as the other person. What are some things we can do to kind of create a meal together that satisfies each other without having to cross a boundary or for someone to overeat, right? That's the analogy that I kind of use. So that's usually
that's a really good analogy, by the way. That's really
Thanks,
good.
man.
I know a lot of people who are literally bored right now because they are eating the same thing. But a lot of people think that because of their spiritual practice, especially what religion has taught many people, that there is only one. That's all you can have. And what's so fun, like just to preface that, when I was in seminary, we learned about when marriage came into existence. It wasn't always a thing. It became into a thing when a ruler, king, decided it was a thing, but that was really to have more control over the communities. If you could control families, you could control countries, right? So before then, it was more open, and people had the freedom to do what they want. Polygamy was a big thing. Men had several wives. It's changed so much today, and there's so much stigma around cheating, around one person being only with one person. How do you introduce that thought? Like if someone has on their mind that I would like multiple people on my menu, how do you introduce that into a spiritual thought so that people don't feel shame?
Yes, it's a tough one, man. You're 100% right. Like people have some very strong spiritual and religious beliefs about their relationship, right? And what their relationship, quote unquote, should look like. And one of the first things that I usually discuss with couples is a practice called the yes, no, maybe game, right? So it's a very simple exercise. It's just a PDF document with a list of a whole bunch of different sexual scenarios, right? And within this list, there's things like having a threesome, or like cockhold fantasies, for example, watching your partner get an erotic massage, things like this. And the safety of this exercise is because there's like over 100 different sexual acts within this. You kind of get wrapped up in this idea of like, oh, look at these things that we could really want to do, and here's some things that maybe I'm not so keen on. I'm a yes to this, I'm a no to this, I'm a maybe to that. And so it kind of lessens the intensity of that particular type of conversation, right? So you can kind of indicate on this list that I'm a yes to trying a threesome, and your partner might be a maybe to trying it, or could be a no to trying it, right? And that sparks a conversation within the whole framework of this game. It's like, well, what other yeses were you? What are some things maybe we can overlap on in terms of our yeses, and can we, are we doing those things? Are we actually fulfilling those kind of needs that we have for those particular experiences? And oh, here's one that I'm a maybe and you're a yes to. Oh, is there maybe something we can have a conversation about? Maybe there's a time where I could do this particular thing. So typically I share with couples, like, rather than diving straight into like, okay, I want to have extra marital relations, or I want to open a relationship, which can be a pretty intense conversation.
That will
like,
not do well for life relationship.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's a pretty intense conversation, and it's like, okay, how can we build to that and explore, variety within us as a monogamous couple, maybe firstly, if that's lacking, and then how can we include this type of variety within the conversation of things to do together.
I remember when we made it rain in a government yard in Brooklyn. Put some respect on his beat.
It's twice. Hey. Wow. It's time.
Yeah, so I can hear the person. I can hear the person right now who is saying, "What in the world? If you don't want it the way I want it or need it the way I need it, then you must not really love me." How do you get past that conversation? Because I can hear the person literally saying, "Well, if you want someone else, you must not really love me. It can't be real." So, what do you say to that person or to that man or woman out there who is experiencing that feeling?
Sure. So there's a there's an idea, right? This is this idea of is it is it reasonable and is it fair to expect one person to fulfill all of our needs, right? And I'm talking
Right.
emotional needs and friendship needs and physical needs and spiritual needs and sexual needs and everything else that we have in terms of like what we need as a human being. Is it
Ooh, that's good.
is it fair and is it even realistic to expect one single person, another human being, to meet all of those things? And you know, I'm in a long-term monogamous relationship, and I don't want to say that I'm an expert on polyamory or open relationships, but like one of the things that my partner and I've talked about is like I need male friends, right? I need she can't fulfill the needs that I have for male friendship because she literally she's not male, so she can't do that. Similarly, she needs female friends, right? Because they meet a specific need for her that I simply can't fulfill. And then there's like, okay, well, if we can accept that, then maybe there's like a bit further. It's like, oh, I need certain physical touch that maybe you're not able to give me. Maybe there's some, I don't want to say that this is necessarily always the case, but maybe there's some trauma there, or maybe there's some resistance there to a certain type of touch. And it's like, okay, cool. I'm going to go and get a massage then. Maybe that's how I can get that touch need fulfilled or that specific need fulfilled. And then it's like, okay, well, if we can accept that, then maybe there's another step to this. And it's like, well, where are you feeling comfortable in terms of meeting those needs? And now that you've accepted that kind of principle and that premise, are you able to maybe extend that and extrapolate it a bit more?
That's good. So, how spiritual is sex?
For me, sex is pretty spiritual, but I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be. Like my opinion is that even if it's a casual encounter and it's a one night stand, there's still a undeniable element of emotionality and intimacy and spirituality to sex. And I don't necessarily subscribe to a specific religion or a specific spirituality, but I've developed kind of my own understanding of what I deem spiritual to me, and what is, I use the word sacred actually as a word that I lean on instead of spiritual. So sex is sacred to me, right? And that's because I place a lot of value on it. I think it's something that's quite important to me, and my sexual my understanding of my sexual self and my sexual expression is quite sacred to me, and sacred looks like, to me it looks different than what it might look like to you or what it might look like to a listener or another person. So I think undeniably there's like an element of sacredness to sexuality, as there is to most important things in life, right? I think there's an element of sacredness to swimming in the ocean, right? I think there's an element of sacredness to like walking through the forests, and if you can tap into that, then you won't have a disappointing experience, as well as like another thing. And I don't want to like project and say that you can't have a pleasurable experience if you're not tapping into something a little bit deeper, and it's if you're just smashing bodies together and experiencing that kind of raw carnal pleasure, there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. And that can be fulfilling. I just think there's also another side of the coin, which is like, you can tap into something deeper and you can appreciate that whilst also just being purely physical, whilst also just kind of smashing bodies together. So yeah, that's kind of my answer. It's not a very straightforward answer. I think it's like very unique to you as an individual.
That's fair. One of the things that I do teach is about body memory. I think a lot of people forget that your body holds memory that your mind may not naturally remember. And so, whenever you have an experience, there are some cultures that literally don't shake hands for that reason, because with casual strangers, because they don't want to take on the energy of other people. In the work that you do, how deep is energy when it comes to sex and having sex with someone else?
Yeah, I like to incorporate like conversations about energetics, especially I do a lot of work with men, and I specifically like to tie the energetics of sexuality into a conversation around ejaculation, for example. I often hear from, and I'm familiar with this, I used to teach this actually, that ejaculation is like very deleterious, or it depletes your energy, and it's very detrimental in a sense, because
Yeah, I've heard that.
you're leaving, this energy is leaving your body. And like it's pretty common teaching, and I don't necessarily disagree with it per se. But if we're talking about like how we use ejaculation and how the energy starts to move maybe from our body when we start to use ejaculation, then it's like, well, how can we allow that energy flow to be something positive rather than to be something really framed quite negatively, right? Where we're kind of losing something if we ejaculate. I kind of teach this practice of, I call it a conscious ejaculation practice. And my philosophy is like, well, if we're thinking of ejaculation as being something that we can move out of our body, then, and there's a whole kind of process to this, which I won't go too deep into, but we can frame ejaculation as a thing that we're giving, rather than something that's like leaving us for a negative consequence. What if it's something that we can give and imbue with maybe some positive, quote unquote, positive energy, or something that's quite nourishing and quite fulfilling. And I talk to men about going outside and giving back to the earth and giving back to the land, and masturbating out in nature, and ejaculating out into out in the woods or whatever it might be. And then I'm like, okay, now that you've kind of got a grasp on giving and nourishing and planting your seed, right? Then what about with your partner? When you're masturbating by yourself, you can kind of get this feel for that positive flow of energy. Now that you're with your partner, what does it feel like to ejaculate in them or with them? A lot of times guys, when they're unconscious of that, they're kind of like dumping, right? They're kind of unloading, right? Even the word load, right?
Right.
From a hard day at work, and they just have sex.
Drop the load, yeah.
Yeah, and it's just like they're just kind of like unloading into their partner, right? They kind of,
Wow.
they're kind of tense and stiff, and then they just kind of like, they kind of masturbate into their partner, right? Like they just treat their partner as just kind of like a masturbation sleeve, essentially. There's kind of no deeper connection there, and they use it as a way to release, right? And that release is that feeling of like that weight off their shoulder from that ejaculation is that release of energy that they've been storing and holding on for the day, that they've been stressed out at work or whatever it might be. But if we kind of like go, okay, what if you went and did that and got rid of that energy in a different way? Maybe it's from a masturbation and ejaculation, or it could be some other kind of energy releasing practice. And then when you're with your partner, you're coming from a place of like being full of quote unquote positive energy, or being full of nourishment or full of goodness. You've got your juices flowing, and when you ejaculate into your partner, it's kind of like you're giving this beautiful positive energy to them, and you're filling them up as well with that beautiful positive energy, and starting to reframe the way that you think about ejaculation, particularly, and getting out of that unconscious way of just like dumping that energy onto your partner, or dumping your tension onto your partner and that anxiety onto your partner through an ejaculation. That's one of the ways that I like to bring the conversation of energetics into it.
That's really good. I think of when I was a preacher, and if you ever see like the preachers that are really, especially the ones that are more animated. I like that word, animated. They talk about how afterwards they have given out so much. Even in the Bible, it talks about when the woman touched the hem of his garment, that he felt the energy come out of him. A lot of times, and she was healed. A lot of times we think of energy coming out in a very positive way, because I'm giving out this energy. If I'm exercising, I'm giving out energy. So it is interesting that sexually, to think of giving up something out of our body is inherently negative. It's kind of weird that only with sex do we think that way. So I'm glad that you framed it that way, because every other time we're saying that it's such a positive thing, that when you work out and give out that energy, you're enhancing your body. So it's just kind of that is interesting. You definitely put a new thought in my head about that. So I appreciate that. I like to play a little game, and it's a lightning round question. This helps me get to know my guest a little bit better. And all you have to do is say one word or a phrase to answer this. So this is really easy. I'll give a test one so you can get comfortable with it. If I said, I am from
England.
There you go. So just that easy. I feel the presence of love when
I rub my partner's pregnant belly.
Oh, that's nice. That's a nice one. How far along?
She's 33 weeks.
Oh, that's great. All right. Congratulations, man. So sticking with feeling higher things, food heaven is when I'm eating.
Ice cream sandwiches.
Hold on. What kind, though?
Oh man, just the plain. We've got a brand here in Australia called Peter's. They do just simple biscuit, vanilla ice cream biscuit. It is next level.
I love it. I'm gonna have to try that out. The purpose of forgiveness is
Growth.
Good sex looks like.
Whatever you want it to look like.
I like that. I am living in my purpose when.
I talk about what I'm passionate about.
The artist I can sit and listen to a rainy day.
The Doors.
Good group. What's the biggest obstacle to your peace?
Not listening to my emotional body.
That's big. Yeah, I get that one. I feel replenished when
When I self-pleasure.
What's the most difficult decision you've ever made to fulfill your purpose?
Starting to work for myself.
That's a big one. Yes, trust me, I know.
Scary.
Yeah, that's a leap, brother. That's a leap of faith right there. What's the word that would describe why you're here?
Education.
Now, if you could erase any habit, any challenge, or any disease, what would it be?
Shame.
And last one, I really like this one. What would you tell your younger self if you could go back in time and whisper in their ear?
Oh man, so much. If I could limit it to one thing, I would say keep exploring. Who cares what other people say?
I love that. Cam, you are a truly fascinating and necessary person in the world. I appreciate this talk and really being able to talk with you about this. I look forward to actually engaging with you more because these kind of conversations are so necessary. And I love the work that you're doing all the way over in Australia, my man. Look, anytime you're stateside, make sure you let us know and we'll reach out to you. But tell everybody where they can find you so they can reach out and get your information as well.
No worries, man. Well, firstly, thank you so much for having a conversation like this, right? Using your platform to have these types of conversations. It's super important, and I really appreciate that. And you can find me at the Cam Fraser on social media, and you can also find me at my website, which is cam-fraser.com.
My man, thank you so much again, brother, and have a beautiful and wonderful day. And where you are, get some rest.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. Thank you.
All right.